Robert Brown, Professor of Communications at Salem State University. I do some adjunct work for many years at Harvard Extension. And today I want to talk about speech writing and speech making. And that was my profession before I got so heavily into academia. I was a speechwriter for the Atlantic Richfield Company in Los Angeles, which was at the time the 12th largest industrial company in the United States, and later for W.R. Grayson Company. These are two global companies. And the speeches, various kinds of speeches were made that I wrote for the CEOs of those companies, for the treasurers of those companies, for technologists, for vice presidents of marketing at various conferences, various places. I had mentioned, I think in my previous video, the Aristotelian pentad, which I won't go into extensively now, but just to refresh your memory, for a speech to be effective, it takes, yes, the speech itself, the speech text itself should be effective. We'll go into that. But the speaker should be credible in terms of the way the audience perceives the speaker. Is the speaker an expert in this? Is the speaker trustworthy? Does the speaker have good character? Ancient and modern, it's the same. In addition, the occasion is very important. I have right here Bill Clinton's speech that he made in Oklahoma City, April 23rd, 1995, after the horrific Oklahoma City bombings by a native homegrown terrorist, and almost 200 people perished in that. It was a horrible event. And he went out and made a short speech. And the occasion was to console, to deal with the grief that those people were feeling. There are all kinds of speeches. There are inspirational speeches, there are congratulation speeches, there are commencement speeches. So the type of speech, the occasion, is very, very important. The nature of the audience is very, very important. What are they thinking? When Clinton went out there and when Obama went to Tucson after the assassinations in Tucson about 2 months ago, there were a complex of needs and motives from that audience. That has to be understood. And the text itself, which we'll go into, has to be effective, and the delivery of the speech has to be effective. So that I think that more than anything else, it's the messenger, but the delivery has to be good too. But let's hear the way Bill Clinton actually delivered that speech in Oklahoma City after that terrible tragedy.
I am honored to be here today to represent the American people. But I have to tell you that Hillary and I also come as parents, as husband and wife, as people who were your neighbors for some of the best years of our lives. Today, our nation joins with you in grief. We mourn with you. We share your hope against hope that some may still survive. We thank all those who have worked so heroically to save lives and to solve this crime, those here in Oklahoma and those who are all across this great land, and many who left their own lives to come here to work hand in hand with you. We pledge to do all we can to help you heal the injured, to rebuild this city, and to bring to justice those who did this evil. This terrible sin took the lives of our American family, innocent children in that building only because their parents were trying to be good parents as well as good workers. Citizens in the building going about their daily business, and many there who served the rest of us, who worked to help the elderly and the disabled, who worked to support our farmers and our veterans, who worked to enforce our laws and to protect us. let us say clearly, they served us well, and we are grateful. But for so many of you, they were also neighbors and friends. You saw them at church or the PTA meetings, at the civic clubs, at the ballpark. You know them in ways that all the rest of America could not. And to all the members of the families here present who have suffered loss, though we share your grief, your pain is unimaginable, and we know that. We cannot undo it. That is God's work. Our words seem small beside the loss you have endured, but I found a few I wanted to share today. I've received a lot of letters in these last terrible days. One stood out because it came from a young widow and a mother of 3 whose own husband was murdered with over 200 other Americans when Pan Am 103 was shot down. Here is what that woman said, I should say to you today. The anger you feel is valid, but you must not allow yourselves to be consumed by it. The hurt you feel must not be allowed to turn into hate, but instead into the search for justice. The loss you feel must not paralyze your own lives. Instead, you must try to pay tribute to your loved ones by continuing to do all the things they left undone, thus ensuring they did not die in vain. Wise words from one who also knows. You have lost too much, but you have not lost everything. And you have certainly not lost America. For we will stand with you for as many tomorrows as it takes. If ever we needed evidence of that, I could only recall the words of Governor and Mrs. Keating. If anybody thinks that Americans are mostly mean and selfish, they ought to come to Oklahoma. If anybody thinks Americans have lost the capacity for love and caring and courage, they ought to come to Oklahoma. To all my fellow Americans beyond this hall, I say, one thing we owe those who have sacrificed is the duty to purge ourselves of the dark forces which gave rise to this evil. They are forces that threaten our common peace, our freedom, our way of life. Let us teach our children that the God of comfort is also the God of righteousness. Those who trouble their own house will inherit the wind. Justice will prevail. Let us let our own children know that we will stand against the forces of fear. When there is talk of hatred, let us stand up and talk against it. When there is talk of violence, let us stand up and talk against it. In the face of death, let us honor life. As St. Paul admonished us, let us not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Yesterday, Hillary and I had the privilege of speaking with some children of other federal employees, children like those who were lost here. And one little girl said something we will never forget. She said, we should all plant a tree in memory of the children. So this morning, before we got on the plane to come here at the White House, we planted that tree in honor of the children of Oklahoma. It was a dogwood with its wonderful spring flower and its deep, enduring roots. It embodies the lesson of the Psalms that the life of a good person is like a tree whose leaf does not wither. My fellow Americans, a tree takes a long time to grow, and wounds take a long time to heal. But we must begin. Those who are lost now belong to God. Someday we will be with them. But until that happens, their legacy must be our lives. Thank you all, and God bless you.
Speeches are logos, ethos, and pathos. That was a pathos speech, a speech of consolation. Very moving. You can see I was moved reading the speech. You'll see Bill Clinton, a great communicator, a great speech writer and giver. It was enormous applause and consolation and tears. President Obama just the other day gave a speech about Libya, which I won't read you, but I wanted to go through that short speech with you because rather than talk about speeches, I want you to see how a speech works, and I'll go back through that. I have a few things that I want to say. I went over that theory review of the pentad. Speech, basic structure, has 3 parts. A preview of the message, I want to tell you something, expressing the message, and reviewing the message. And notice how in that speech that Bill Clinton gave, one of the really great speeches of his, and so deeply appropriate and so well received, that he didn't just review what he said at the end. He brought this to a higher level. He talked about the Psalms. He talked about the dogwood. And he repeated things. The stylistic rhetoric is so important in speech writing. And that rhetoric is a rhetoric of repetition and parallelism. And short sentences. Today our nation joins with you in grief. We mourn with you. We share your hope that against hope that some will survive. And short subject, verb, object sentences in English. Short and effective. Notice that in that speech too, there was a reference to the Bible. This is the Bible part of the country, Oklahoma in the U.S. That's a place of where there's intense amount of religiousness, or some say religiosity. Religion, very powerful thing there. That was very appropriate rhetorically. Rhetoric, Aristotle said, is understanding the means by which to be persuasive, and I would say to be effective. And that's what he was doing there. Not a long speech. Speech takes about, for every page, usually takes about 2 minutes. For every page of typewritten 250 words on a page, maybe 2 minutes to say that at a public distance, speaking even more slowly than I spoke. An example of a preview. Thank you for that generous introduction, Professor Ordeix. I am pleased to have the opportunity to tell this esteemed audience of entrepreneurs about the value of corporate social responsibility. I see three major competitive advantages and three corresponding problems. The reason for that is you want to tell the audience, when you're doing a speech, this speech won't take forever, and it's going to be very organized, and I have three things to tell you, and they're going to be challenges, and I'm going to try to solve them. Aristotle, many centuries ago, listed several types of persuasion. The syllogism, which was a logical proof, all men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Socrates is mortal. That's a syllogism. Then there's the enthymeme, which is most of the ways in which E-N-T-H-Y-M-E-M-E, that is a kind of maxim. The fox knows many things. The hedgehog knows one big thing. That is an enthymematic way of speaking. It's not a logical proof. How does a speaker be persuasive or effective? In the text, delivery is very important. There are many better speech writers, speech makers than I am. I'm a speech writer. The killer statistic is one. An example, in a speech aiming to persuade an audience that healthcare costs must and can be contained. Let's say the CEO of a hospital speaking to a hospital association. According to the National Institutes of Health, just 3% of the population of Newark, New Jersey, accounted for more than 90% of that city's healthcare costs. Now, when this speaker is giving a speech, probably speaking to a teleprompter, you would not see him looking down the way I'm looking down. You would see him looking very naturally, he or she, into a teleprompter. If not, speakers don't memorize speeches, as a rule, as they did in the ancient days. Another aspect of persuasiveness for a speech is quotes. In a speech promoting Barcelona as a world tourist destination, speaker might write, 5 of the leading 5 travel guides list Barcelona as one of the top 3 destinations for world tourism in 2010. And that also could have even made more effective if it was mentioned a well-known travel writer or magazine. Ethos. In that Bill Clinton speech, it's not me. It wasn't me. That was Bill Clinton. I was channeling my inner Bill Clinton, my inner President of the United States. Those people didn't want to see Robert Brown, professor. They wanted to see the President of the United States, not a public relations person, not an advertising person, not a marketing person or a vice president or a corporate person. They wanted to see the President of the United States because that bomb killed all those people and children, and innocent people in Oklahoma City. They wanted to see the President of the United States, just as 2 days ago the American people wanted to see Barack Obama explain why the United States was leading the air support and bombing in Libya. And he did, and I have that speech here, which I will show you. And these are political speeches, speeches that you will do may be political, they may be organizational, they may be corporate, they may be about marketing, something not nearly as emotional as this, very logos-oriented. In a speech intended to raise funds for victims of the Japanese tsunami, I come here tonight with more than my imagination of disaster. My parents' house in Sendai, Japan was swept away by the tsunami. It is a blessing beyond words that my mother and father were in Barcelona with me when the big waves rolled over everything. So that personal connection, that's ethos and that's pathos. Stories are persuasive. Stories are effective because a speech can't only be info. We live in the information age, but we live in the entertainment age. And that screen that you're looking at, that's a television screen. And I will show you another screen. This screen, my BlackBerry, that's a television screen. Your computers, your laptops, those are television screens. Your iPhones, your droids. We live in a video age. I'm in a television studio and an analog studio. Increasingly, the web is going in that direction. What are we but our stories? That's what a character in a play said about a play about two playwrights. Stories are very powerful. Even if they're little moments, Hillary and I, remember Bill Clinton says, Hillary and I planted a tree. There's a little story in a speech. It's information, but it is a way of depicting someone who cares, someone's credibility in a speech based upon pathos. Stories touch on ethos, the character and credibility of the speaker, and pathos. And the way Bill Clinton portrayed himself was not only as the President of the United States, which everyone knew he was, but as a father and as a husband, someone who could relate to these people. And it was a very, also, his character, his ethos, is very human. In fact, indeed, with the Monica Lewinsky scandal that you all know about that happened later, is all too human. Pathos. Speeches are perceptual. All public relations, all advertising, all politics, it's really perceptual from the rhetorical point of view. That is, it doesn't matter if I think I'm effective. You have to think I'm effective. It's in your perception. So I have to understand what your perceptions are coming in. I have to understand the audience, in other words, and the occasion. Martin Luther King's great, great speech, I Have a Dream. Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, which I've sent you, and the second inaugural, which is wonderful. John F. Kennedy's Ask Not What Your Country Can Do For You, Ask What You Can Do For Your Country. His inaugural speech in 1960 when he was elected, when he took the presidency. Speechwriting style. Notice the technique. In the previous example, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. See how that turns around? See how that sentence turns around? The sentence gets its rhetorical, that is persuasive power, from its syntactical reversal and the repetition of key elements. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. It's the ability to write like that, to think like that. That works. That may work better in English than in Catalan, but because you're a Latin-based language. But nevertheless, rhetoric for the Romans and for the Greeks and for the Americans and for everyone is essential. Notice also that the foundation of rhetoric, ethos, pathos, logos, the power, the acute sensitivity to the hot buttons of the audience, their worries, their hopes, their fears, their concerns. That's important. What are your concerns? You want to get a good grade in the course. You want to have the information which will help you with the final exam in the course, which is coming when I come, the last day in multiple choice, these questions. You want to have information. So when I speak to you, you want to take notes from the PowerPoint. You want to be able to understand and grasp and be able to ask questions after. And for public speaking, there are no questions as a rule. No questions for Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. But in many organizational speeches, people will ask questions. How long should a speech be? 20 minutes. Why? It can be longer. The speech can be an hour. Fidel Castro gives speeches for 4 hours or 5 hours. I don't think I would pay attention that long. But the average person tends to tune out after about 20 minutes. So I'm going to even speak longer than that. But then I have you in my grip because you need a grade at the end of the class. Audiences tend to lose interest after 20 minutes. Speeches have to be entertaining. The U.S. Presidential State of the Union address, and forgive me for my ethnocentric references all the time, U.S. monolingual, that's my flaw, that's my narrowness. But I come from my cultural references. The State of the Union address, which takes place every year when the President talks to Congress and the Supreme Court about, in Congress about the State of the Union of the United States, it's about an hour. And it's kind of a boring speech. He runs through all of the different pieces of the agenda, how things are the state of the nation is strong, we have to do these things, we have to build these things. And he will turn sometimes and point up to the gallery and say, and when it comes to the military, there is a hero who served in wherever, who served in Iraq or Afghanistan or was part of the no-fly zone enforcement in Libya. And person stands up and there's applause. So a speech is a theatrical performance. Indeed, the theory of dramaturgy says that we are, much of our lives, we are performing, as I am in a sense for you now, and as we perform interpersonally, we perform in a classroom, we perform for a job. It is a performance. Understanding the nature of the needs of the performance, very important. The fifth dimension of the speech, remember there was speaker, occasion, audience, text, and then the fifth one is delivery. The speaker must make that speech his or her own. By the end of that speech, I was getting emotional. Did you see that? It was a hard time for me to get through that speech. I'd never read it fully that way. It was a cold reading. But a speaker really, really needs to get to know that speech. So when I write a speech, or you write a speech, you ghostwrite a speech for someone, which you might do in public affairs or public relations, for a corporation, for a not-for-profit organization, public-private partnership, you want to rehearse that speaker. So the speaker says that speech over and over again. It becomes his or her own speech. And that's where the emotion comes. The audience wants to see the speaker engage with the speech, not just reading, delivery is the fifth dimension. You don't want to see that. You want to see a speaker engaged with what the speaker is saying so that it comes like an actor. It comes from the soul. And rehearse the speaker to see that the speaker can say all of the sentences. Can I say, Libya sits directly between Tunisia and Egypt, two nations that inspired the world when their people rose up to take control of their own destiny? I can say that, but there's certain things that I write for speakers that they have trouble saying. Just as in a movie, with the script writers there, you have to rewrite that so that the speaker can easily say it, because the bottom line of a speech is the delivery of the speech. Also, it's not so bad, I'm talking with my hands, but it's not so bad. It's a good idea to be moved to make gestures, but not mechanical gestures, but ones that come from the body, one that comes from the soul, so that if you're feeling it like the way I'm feeling it, then those gestures are normal and natural, and not too many of them, perhaps, to be distracting. And they must look and be spontaneous. That means rehearsal. Here's a speech of a student of mine from Harvard gave this speech about very technical subject to an expert in corn growing in the Midwest of the United States, where there's a lot of corn in Nebraska and other states where a lot of corn is grown in the Midwest, the breadbasket of the United States. And the speech was ghost-written for Jennifer Snyder, a director of regulatory and technical affairs for the Corn Refiners Association. And it was, the speech was given a title, Is Corn a Four-Letter Word? Which is a little joke in English. Four-letter word is a dirty word. And it was delivered at the 4th Annual Corn Utilization and Technology Conference. It was sponsored by the National Corn Growers Association and Corn Refiners Association in Indianapolis. And I say those things because that's always strategically important. What's the speech called? What are the objectives of the speech? To explain the nature of corn and some of the myths surrounding corn. Where was it given, and why was it given there? Who was sponsoring it? And when was it given? All the timing is part of strategy, as you know. The place is part of strategy, just as in marketing. The classic 4 Ps in marketing: place, product, price, and promotion. Place is important. If I go to Nordstrom, if I go to Macy's, or if I go to If I go to Tiffany, that's different than if I go to Walmart or Starbucks. If I go to Starbucks, I'm not going to Dunkin' Donuts, where the place that we make contact with a product or person is very, very important. So in strategizing to create a speech, who should give it? Bill Clinton, if it's that kind of speech. A speech about corn should be someone who really understands that. Where should it be delivered? To which audience? And why? What is the purpose of the speech? To raise awareness of little-known facts, to change an audience's mind, to console, to inspire, to motivate, to scold, to demonstrate strength and leadership. Barack Obama wants to demonstrate his leadership here, and I'm looking into the transcript. He's explaining to his critics on television that he has a certain responsibility to make a case for the United States leading in Libya to the no-fly zone. Let's hear excerpts of that speech from Barack Obama.
Tonight, I'd like to update the American people on the international effort that we have led in Libya, what we've done, what we plan to do, and why this matters to us. I want to begin by paying tribute to our men and women in uniform, who once again have acted with courage, professionalism, and patriotism. They have moved with incredible speed and strength. Because of them and our dedicated diplomats, a coalition has been forged and countless lives have been saved. For generations, the United States of America has played a unique role as an anchor of global security and as an advocate for human freedom. Mindful of the risks and costs of military action, we are naturally reluctant to use force to solve the world's many challenges. But when our interests and values are at stake, we have a responsibility to act. That's what's happened in Libya over the course of these last 6 weeks. Libya sits directly between Tunisia and Egypt, two nations that inspired the world when their people rose up to take control of their own destiny. For more than 4 decades, the Libyan people have been ruled by a tyrant, Muammar Gaddafi. He has denied his people freedom, exploited their wealth, murdered opponents at home and abroad, and terrorized innocent people around the world, including Americans who were killed by Libyan agents. 10 days ago, having tried to end the violence without using force, the international community offered Gaddafi a final chance to stop his campaign of killing or face the consequences. Rather than stand down, his forces continued their advance, bearing down on the city of Benghazi, home to nearly 700,000 men, women, and children who sought their freedom from fear. At this point, the United States and the world faced a choice. Gaddafi declared he would show no mercy to his own people. He compared them to rats and threatened to go door to door to inflict punishment. In the past, we had seen him hang civilians in the streets and kill over 1,000 people in a single day. Now we saw regime forces on the outskirts of the city. We knew that if we waited one more day, Benghazi, a city nearly the size of Charlotte, could suffer a massacre that would have reverberated across the region and stained the conscience of the world. In fact, much of the debate in Washington has put forward a false choice when it comes to Libya. On the one hand, some question why America should intervene at all, even in limited ways, in this distant land. They argue that there are many places in the world where innocent civilians face brutal violence at the hands of their government. And America should not be expected to police the world, particularly when we have so many pressing needs here at home. To brush aside America's responsibility as a leader, and more profoundly, our responsibilities to our fellow human beings under such circumstances, would have been a betrayal of who we are. Some nations may be able to turn a blind eye to atrocities in other countries. The United States of America is different. And as president, I refuse to wait for the images of slaughter and mass graves before taking action. As Commander-in-Chief, I have no greater responsibility than keeping this country safe. And no decision weighs on me more than when to deploy our men and women in uniform. I've made it clear that I will never hesitate to use our military swiftly, decisively, and unilaterally when necessary to defend our people, our homeland, our allies, and our core interests. That's why we're going after al-Qaeda wherever they seek a foothold. That is why we continue to fight in Afghanistan, even as we have ended our combat mission in Iraq and removed more than 100,000 troops from that country. I believe that this movement of change cannot be turned back, and that we must stand alongside those who believe in the same core principles that have guided us through many storms. Our opposition to violence directed at one's own people. Our support for a set of universal rights, including the freedom for people to express themselves and choose their leaders. Our support for governments that are ultimately responsive to the aspirations of the people. Ultimately, it is that faith, those ideals, that are the true measure of American leadership.
That's what he said. That's one of the things that he said in his 26-minute-long speech. Speeches become powerful because of mass graves, because of images, because of metaphors. I have a dream, Martin Luther King said. It wasn't information. So the language of a speech, hugely important. Organizational strategy. Here are three, in forming a speech, here are three major myths about a subject. Barcelona, lawyers, professors, the World Wide Web. Myth one, state the myth. People believe that. Reality, state the fact. Structuring perhaps three key points in a speech, and then previewing that and talking about them. It's a useful way to tell the audience that this is an organized speech. And then, in moving from point to point, we make what speechwriters call pointers. We say, now I'm going to move on to the second subject. Now I'm going to move on to the third subject. So we tell the audience we're moving along bit by bit by bit. Newsworthiness, that's another important part of a speech. It's great if a speech can make news, and that would mean that it would be interesting enough to be newsworthy. And these days, it's a little easier in a way because there are bloggers. The speech may be live tweeted. It may be out there. And for the mainstream media, does it matter? Is it interesting? Is it timely? Does it relate to some trend? News releases tend to be picked up more by the mainstream press when they are timely. A speech by the President of the United States is always going to be picked up. But a speech for the Corn Growers Association, it would be picked up if there was something newsworthy. Perhaps because gasoline in the United States now costs $4.50, perhaps making corn into gasoline, which can reduce the price of corn-made gasoline to about $2.50, that would be newsworthy. That's something for the speech writer to think about. What quotes to put in there, what bites, what statistics to put in there that would be newsworthy. How could it be tied into the flow of news? Diction. High diction. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Middle diction. Barcelona is the second leading destination for tourists worldwide. Low diction. Yo, this is great. Speeches, political speeches at the Clinton level and at the Obama level about great moments like this. The Martin Luther King speech, those are high diction speeches. Most speeches you will write are straightforward language, really conversational language, and they're not highly stylized. They're middle diction. If you came to a 20-minute speech in the 19th minute and you asked someone, what did the speaker say? Would the person that you asked be able to tell you, oh, he said that corn doesn't kill you? Great, that's terrific. But if it's not clear what the takeaway message is, then that speech is not as effective as it could be, which means you'd want to repeat the main message of that speech near the end of the speech, perhaps at the very end of the speech. I've said for style, very technical thing, avoid long dependent clauses. Not this. Because of the many concerns and the questions and problems that here have confronted, never like that. It takes too long. Better, this organization has to tackle many problems. We've rough sledding these past 2 decades. Simple subject and verb and object sentences. Humor is dangerous because one person's humor is another person's humiliation. Humor is risky business. So it's very tough. Even comedians fail and they get into trouble on that. Sound bites. Here is a speech that I wrote for a conservative CEO to make to a graduating class in the US many, many years ago. At the current rate of inflation, in 10 years, an ice cream cone will cost $12.50. Your babysitter, $110 for the evening, and your movie ticket will set you and your husband or wife back $227.77. That was quoted in the newspapers. Kind of amusing. It's a statistic. Those are sound bites. Merchandisability. That speech should not finish with the speaker's delivery. There's the corporate website. There are bloggers. There is the corporate annual report. There are corporate magazines, organizational. There are flyers. There are other ways to get that. There's a video to put it in the corporate cafeteria lunchroom so that everyone can see it. The speech should be merchandised. And of course, it could appear, I've sent you to Vital Speeches of the Day. It can be actually published if it's a really good speech. Be published in Vital Speeches of the Day. You've seen some of the ones that I've written and others. And if it's to a small audience, there could be a question and answer period. The speaker can be ready with a question. If no one asks a question, the speaker can ask a question of himself or herself. So here, let me ask myself a question. That would avoid the awkwardness of no one asking a question. Those are the basic elements of speech writing and speech making for you, and I look forward to seeing you face to face. Thank you.